And welcome back to the True Crime Lounge. Today we are continuing on with our Charles Manson series. Which, if you follow my Instagram page, you will see what I posted an interesting story about him. It was about, and rest in peace to the beloved Angela Lansbury. I love her. I loved her. But on this story, let me pull it up. On this story, it goes, Angela Lansbury once told a story about how her daughter Deirdre, who was falling under the spell of a Hollywood deadbeat. He introduced her to drugs and would get her to steal food and money from her parents. And for him, worried, she decided to move her entire family to Ireland. That deadbeat guy was Charles Manson. Conveniently happens to fall perfectly with our series, I think. So today we're going to be talking about the trial. I can't remember who I'm going to do next after this Charles Manson series. But, depending on how long it is, it might not be as many videos this time around, so I'm going to hope for that one. But let's step into the True Crime Lounge. But before I continue, I want you to hit that like button, comment someone or something you want me to talk about next. Ring that bell for notifications and hit that subscribe button. Now let's continue. The trial began on June 5th, 1970. The prosecutor's main witness was Cassabine, who along with Manson, Atkins, and Krimwinkel, just sounds like something you'll find. Anyway, had been charged with 7 counts of murder and 1 in this conspiracy. Not having participated in the killings, she was granted immunity in exchange for her testimony that details the night of the crimes. Originally, a deal had been made with Atkins in which the prosecution agreed to not seek the death penalty against her in exchange for a grand jury testimony on which the indictments were secured. Once Atkins reduplicated that testimony, the deal was withdrawn. Because Von Houten had only participated in the LaBianca killings, she was charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 of conspiracy. Originally, Judge William King had reluctantly granted Manson permission to act as his own attorney. Because of Manson's conduct, including violations of his gag order and submissions to outlandish and nonsensical pretrial motions, the permission was withdrawn before the trial started. Manson filed an affidavit of prejudice against King, who was replaced by Judge H. Holder. On Friday, July 24th, the first day of testimony, Manson appeared in court with an X carved in his forehead. He had issued a statement that he was considered inadequate and incompetent to speak or defend himself, and had X'd himself from the establishment's world. Over the duplicated mark on his own forehead, the females had a duplicated mark on their own foreheads, and asked most of the family members when another day. Manson's X was eventually replaced by a swastika. This prosecution placed the triggering of helter-skelter as the main motive. The crime scene where Blake White's albums referenced Pig, or I's helter-skelter, was correlated with testimony about Manson's prediction that the murderers, blacks, would comment on the outset to helter-skelter, which would involve the writing of pigs on the victim's blood, on the walls in victim's blood. This testimony has said now that the time helter-skelter was supplemented with Casabine's testimony on the night of the LaBianca murders. Manson considered disregarding Rosemary LaBianca's wallet on the street of a black neighborhood. Having obtained the wallet in the LaBianca house, he wanted a black person to pick it up and used the credit cards so that the people, the establishment, would think it was some sort of organized crime that killed these people. On his directions, Casabine had hidden it in the women's restroom of the service station near a black area. I want to show Blackie how to do it, Manson has said, as his family members have driven along after the departure of the La Bianca house. For ongoing disruptions during the trial, family members have loitered the entrances in the corridors of the courthouse. To keep them out of the courtroom itself, the prosecution subpoenaed them as prospective witnesses who were unable to enter while others were testifying. Hang on, people. So when the group's establishment as the vigil on when the group's establishment established itself as a vigil on the sidewalk, each of the other members of the hardcore members or sheathed a hunting knife that would be in plain view was carried legally. Each of them was identified by the X on his or her forehead. Some family members attempted to dissuade witnesses from testifying. Prosecution witness Paul Watkins and Juan Flynn were both threatened. Watkins had badly burned into a suspicious fire in his van. Former member Barbara Holt, who was ahead of Susan Atkins, described in Tate Murder's family member Ruth Ann Morehouse, agreed to accompany the latter to Hawaii. Therefore, Morehouse allegedly gave her a hamburger, spiked her with several overdoses of LSD. Found sprawled in a Honolulu curb in a drugged semi-stupor, Hoyt was taken to a hospital where she did her best to identify herself as the witness in the Tate LaBianca murder trial. Before the incident, Hoyt had been a reluctant witness after the attempt to silence her. Her reticence disappeared. On August 4th, despite precautions taken by the court, Manson flashed the jury of Los Angeles Times front page with "Manson guilty, Nixon declares." That was the headline. So, this was a reference to a statement made the previous day when U.S. President Richard Nixon had decreed what he has said in the media's glamorization of Manson. Brought out by the judge, the jurors contended that the headline had been not influenced them. The next day, a female defendant stood up and said in unison, in light of Nixon's remark, they were no longer on point with going for the trial. On October 15th, Manson was denied the court's permission to question the prosecution's witness, whom the defense attorneys had declined to cross-examine. Leaping over the defense table, Manson attempted to attack the judge. Wrestled to the grounds of the bailiffs, he had been removed from the courthouse with a female defendant who subsequently risen and began chanting in Latin. Therefore, Older allegedly began wearing a revolver around his robe. The defense rest. On November 16th, the prosecution rested. 3 days later, after arguing the standard dismissal motions, the defense stunned the courtroom without calling a single witness, shouting their disapproval. The Atkins, Krimwinkel and Van Houten demanded their right to testify. In chambers, the women lawyers told the judge their clients wanted to testify that they had been planned and committed by the crimes, that Manson had not been involved. By resting their case, the defense lawyers had tried to stop this. Van Houten's attorney, Ronald Hughes, vehemently stated that he would not push a client out the window. In the prosecutor's view, it was Manson who had been advising the women to testify in his way as a means of saving himself. Speaking about the trial in 1987 documentary, Krimwinkel, the entire proceedings were scripted by Charlie. The next day, Manson testified lest he violate the California Supreme Court People versus Ormanda by making statements implicating his co-defendants. The jury removed from the courtroom. Speaking for an hour, Manson, among others, thinks that the music is telling the young about the establishment. He said, "Why blame it on me? I don't write the music." To be honest with you, Manson also stated that I don't recall ever saying, "Get a knife and a change of clothes and go do what Tex says." Really? You don't recall that, huh, Manson? You don't recall. Well, as the body of the trial concluded with the closing arguments impending, attorney Ronald Hughes disappeared during a weekend trip, with Maxwell Keefe was appointed to represent Van Houten in Hughes' absence. A delay in more than 2 weeks was required to permit Keefe to familiarize with the trial transcripts. No sooner had the trial resumed, just before Christmas, than disruptions of the prosecution's closing argument by defendants led Older to ban 4 defendants from the courtroom for the remainder of the guilt phase. Older said that it had obviously that the defendants were acting in conclusion with others and simply putting off the performance. Now, onward to the conviction and penalty phase, shall we? On July 25th, guilty verdicts were returned across 4 defendants on the 27 separate accounts charges against them. Not far into the trial's penalty phase, the jurors saw that the defense of Manson, in the prosecution's view, had planned to be present. Atkins, Krimwinkel, and Van Houten testified the children had been conceived as a copycat version of the Hinman murder, for which Atkins now took credit. The killing, they said, was intended to draw suspicion away from Bobby Bosasol by resembling the crime which he had been jailed. The plan also supposedly had worked and carried out the guidance not Manson, but someone allegedly in love with Bosasol. Linda Casabine, among the narratives for the week's point, and she maintained how she had written Political Piggy at the Hinman's in the first place. Midway through the penalty phase, Manson shaved his head and trimmed his beard with a fork. He told the press, "I am the devil, and the devil always has a bald head," in which the prosecution regarded as belated recognition of the part of the imitation of Manson only approved his domination. The female defendants refrained from shaving their heads until the jurors retired their way of the state's request death penalty. In an effort to exonerate Manson via copycat scenario failed, on March 29, 1971, the jurors returned with verdicts of death against all defendants. Can't talk for some reason. Defendants on all counts. On April 9, 1971, judge ordered sentence to the 4 to death. On the day of the verdicts recommending a death penalty was returned, news came back that that ballad composed by Ronald Hughes had been wedged between two boulders in Ventura County. It was rumored, although never proven, that Hughes was murdered by the family, possibly because he stood up to Manson and refused to allow Von Houten to take the stand on the absolve of Manson of the crimes, and he was perished and the family members of the order's retaliation. Okay, that is it for this one. Next week, we're going to be talking about the aftermath and finishing up our series on Charles Manson. I'm not sure if I want to talk about Don't Drink the Kool-Aid next or what yet, so I'm going to see, and I will see y'all next time.